why? Why even put yourselves back through it again?
Okay, like if we're going to do this, I'm all in. I actually believe in these things. It matters to me. My sort of early political leanings, again, whether that was sort of experiencing communism in Czechoslovakia or, going through 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade in Pottstown, Pennsylvania,
right,
in a burned out town that sort of exemplifies like what happened to the American dream and shipping American manufacturing abroad. It's why it's so awesome what you do and doing it all here. I think the reality is he's a competitor. He's a fighter, and, I think he sort of looked at it initially like, okay, well, I've been talking crap for 25 years. Like, if no one's going to do it, like I'll just step in. I think he would have gladly supported someone else if he believed that there was someone else there that could handle sort of the incoming.
I actually am interested in, and I haven't really asked you about this. I've texted you a couple times about how you are with your kids, but I'm actually interested a little bit in your childhood, about growing up, son of a billionaire, blah, 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 in New York City, all that. But one thing that I don't think is talked about enough in media about your dad is the job of parenting that your parents did, whatever that situation was, how they did such a good job with parenting with, you look at your siblings, or with your dad's kids, of how accomplished you guys all are, how well-spoken, how professional, how hardworking. There's a lot of people that grow up with some money or in that situation and whatnot that end up with kids that are frankly kind of shitbags, and
I know a lot of them.
I'm sure. So what was it like as a kid growing up? Like, how did your dad instill that work ethic in you? And I'm sure he was busy and trying to do everything he was doing. What was your childhood like?
Listen, we were obviously very blessed. I think I have a sort of multiple sort of things that just happened in my life that sort of shaped that, right? My mother was Eastern European. She escaped communist Czechoslovakia because she was an Olympic skier. Came into the country legally. We got to be clear, because otherwise people give me a hard time. But she made sure that we understood just how blessed we were. Yeah. So sort of my foundation, probably honestly the foundation for my outdoor sort of passions, as well as probably the foundation for some of my political leanings, really started then, because from the age of 5, she sent me to go visit my grandfather every summer. It was just me and him to what was then communist Czechoslovakia in
really?
Eastern Europe, behind the wall, like kind of thing. And
would your siblings go with you?
They did when a little bit older, because I'm the oldest, and but it was a different experience for me because by the time they were a little bit older, my grandparents spoke English. Like, I speak fluent Czech.
Oh, really?
You know what I mean? So I'd go there, and I was 5 years old, speaking fluent Czech. I had friends, and it was just like, there's the woods. I'll see you at dark.
Yeah.
But I also, simultaneously, that's sort of how I got into the woods and the outdoorsmanship and a little bit of fishing. There was no hunting because you weren't, Communist Party elite. It's very different. Was very different there than it would be here. But just sort of got into that passion around the camaraderie around a campfire. Saw all of that. But I also saw, sort of the proverbial bread lines.
Yeah.
Waiting for these things and doing that. And it just from a very early age, instilled both perhaps some of my biggest passions, again, that outdoor time, the campfire time, that decompression away from the craziness of the world, but as well as my, whether it's capitalism, whether it's freedom, I didn't know anything about that at the time. I just, I remember my first sort of memory of fear was literally the first time going over there was, I guess it's probably like 1982 or whatever, like, I had a blonde bowl cut. I was about 5-6 years old, and it was like I got pulled out of a customs line because I was wearing a jean jacket with like the stars and stripes on it. It was like, "Are you here to spread the propaganda?" I'm like, "I'm 6. I don't know what propaganda is." Like, it wasn't like I was missing that word in Czech. I was fluent, but like I didn't even know what it was, and it was just like, wow, that's sort of weird. Like, pulled out of line with a military officer with an AK over his shoulder as a 6-year-old. You're like,
yeah,
sort
it's
of
a different world over there.
Yeah, it was. I saw, even in that house, I saw, my parents' wedding picture there, and I'm like, well, that's weird. Like, my grandfather's in the wedding picture, but my grandmother isn't. Like, why isn't she there? And it's like, well, the reality is like they were not going to let 2 people in a couple leave the country simultaneously because they know they're not coming back. Yeah. And that was sort of what kind of system
Yeah.
You not allow people to travel together because you know they're not coming back. That's probably not great. So whether it was intentional or not on my mother's sort of behalf, I think it was a great thing in terms of, life lessons and, again, camaraderie and sort of the real stuff that, so much of what I base my outdoor experiences on, not just, pulling the trigger and killing something, but the campfire time and,
yes,
that kind of stuff, but as well as the political side.
That, I before we had ever, I think, even hardly met, I'd compliment you over social media about the fact that you get your kids out, and you really do expose them. And I hate to say it this way, but like to the real world, like people who are just average people in Montana or Wyoming or wherever, Alaska, just, whether it's an outfitter or a rancher or whatever, but I felt an amazing job, as a family, getting your kids exposed outside of the big city and outside of that particular part of the world, into the more rural side of the world, and like letting your kids out riding four-wheelers and doing stuff that like I grew up doing.
Yeah.
That we would be out on four-wheelers with our BB guns and playing and just being completely free and being allowed to just go be kids, where I actually feel really bad for a lot of kids in these huge cities. When I was in, I spent quite a bit of time in the Bronx when we were shooting that Forged in Fire TV show, and I would just go walk around. And I was like, man, it made me sad. Walk by a park. There was no green grass in it. I mean, the basketball hoops were torn to shit. And there's a mom out there watching her kid play on this dry piece of dirt that they thought was a park. And I thought about how fortunate I was, even though I didn't really grow up with money. I got to, we talked about this morning, like I had a local guy in town, like pick me up and take me bow hunting. And it was free because it's public land. And I just grew up, I thought that was normal.
Well, that was my first actual hunting experience was like that. I went to boarding school in central Pennsylvania, so that's a little bit, the spoiled thing, but it was, sort of dilapidated old town, one of these sort of towns that, time forgot, right? It was a home of Firestone tires in the day, and then you just see, sort of dilapidated factories, and you see some of that. But that was how I got into it. It was like guys, they saw I was passionate about sort of the outdoors, but I had no way of really breaking in. And they're like, hey, 6 a.m. tomorrow, dress warm.
So that's kind of when you
like my first
got to hunt.
Like big game hunt was opening day Pennsylvania deer season.
Sure.
Back in the early 90s, there was a guy that taught me the basics of like a different guy. At the school, it taught me the basics of like a fly casting stroke. And I mean, for the first 3 years of my fly fishing career, like I reeled it in every time. Like I didn't strip. I didn't know enough to do it, but I knew I was passionate about it. And I'd hop on my bike and try to find a little spring creek somewhere. Got into it more that way. So for me, the outdoor stuff it was so good. I'm not saying I was an angel,
right?
But like, it kept me out of so much other trouble I would have been in, as a city kid from New York, and I just appreciate that so much that I really put my kids into that. So even now, it's like on a week we live in Florida now, so it's different. I used to go up to my cabin in the Catskills in New York, and but now it's like, hey, if we can get on the boat, or if we can go pig hunting, if we can do something like anything to get them in the woods, to get them on the range, archery, bow, shotguns, rifles, handguns, doesn't matter,
right? Just
anything to do that, and they all ride ATVs and motorcycles.
Well, and there's so much responsibility they learn with that, with handling whether it's an ATV or a gun or whatever. It just makes such a well-rounded person, whether or not they hunt someday, like when they're 30 years old, who knows if they'll hunt or if they won't hunt, or if your daughters will or your sons will. Same thing with my kids, like whether or not they hunt someday. It also kind of forces you to take a break from daily life. I don't care who you are. I don't care if your dad's running for president or if you're just a guy that's busy working in an office in Missoula, Montana. Hunting forces that, you to put that phone away and to just, and it puts on a calendar a time like when I take my kids out to eastern Montana deer hunting, it's some of our best memories, and it's really quite simple. You just pull a camper out there and park it or a tent and hunt, but it forces you to step out of the busyness and the rat race of life and just play cards around a campfire or in the camper.
Well, it also teaches sort of, patience, perseverance, discipline. Sort of all of the stuff. I mean, hunting especially, but fishing, the shooting sports, there's consequences if it goes wrong.
Yeah.
And I feel like kids today, there's that everything's sort of an instant gratification society now. If they show up somewhere, they get a participation trophy, or if they're not, on a video game for somebody, there's not enough excitement. And so being able to decompress from that and learn those basic life skills, I also, if you can get a kid off a couch and into the woods, on a range, in a river, on a pond, whatever it is, you're doing them a major, life favor.
Yeah.
So you're right. It's not just about hunting. I have 5 kids, so it's like, I know how that happens now. I took up a much less vicious hobby called politics, I guess. But the other ones all will shoot. My daughter, who is a really good golfer, once a year, once every 6 months, she's like, hey, can we go shoot clays? And she's like really good. Like she's just the same coordination that makes her a really good golfer, makes her a really good shooter. And it's sort of funny, but and then she always has a great time. And then it's like, but hunting's not her thing right now. If she ever wants to do it, great. But my 2 boys that do it, I always joke, for me as a hunter, I was like, in my next life, I want to come back as my son because you're doing some stuff that I couldn't, I couldn't imagine doing because, I wasn't a trust fund kid despite being blessed. My father wasn't a hunter, so it wasn't like, if I was a golfer, it's like, yeah, sure, I'll get you on Augusta. I'll figure out how to make that happen. You could do legendary stuff.
You had to figure out the hunting
some real
on your
epic
own.
shit. I had to figure it out on my own and just literally, but that was also the greatest lessons.
Yep.
In doing that. And so for me, learning that game, that, coming from also a competitive shooting background, sort of just figuring all these things out, it just sort of worked real well.
The other thing that hunting does, I've told my kids, we've been sitting in the Missouri River breaks and talking about how hardcore, the Lewis and Clark expedition, and just sitting there imagining those people rowing upstream on a canoe with hundreds and hundreds of pounds of gear through Indian country and grizzly bears and whatever else. It was all unknown to them. Yeah. Hunting takes all of us into places you would just never go if you weren't a hunter. And for your kids, for my kids, for myself personally, I've been places in this world and in this country hunting that is off of the typical tourism path.
Yep.
It's just
a way to see the world.
Yes.
I mean, for me, I think I've been over 75, 80 countries, and a lot of that is well, what do you think of the major city? I was like, I don't know. I flew into the airport and then I was, I drove 19 hours on a dirt road. I mean, been to, my son's been to Mongolia twice.
Yeah.
He just turned 15.
Yeah.
Romania and Spain and, Africa with me.
Well,
hunting.
And he gets to see how the locals live. Take the hunting side out of it. He gets to see real actual struggle and different cultures and.
Well, and honestly, it was sort of interesting. I almost had the reverse experience with my son last year. I took him to Tanzania. We went to the Maasai.
Yeah.
And you fly into Kilimanjaro, and we drove hours to get into, some really, really remote part of the world. And and before that, you have sort of, what you hear about Africa in school or whatever it was. And he was like, well, is it going to be safe? Is it going to what? And he's like, 48 hours into this thing, I'm like, so you're safe? He's like, these are the nicest people I've ever seen. Why isn't everyone in America this friendly, talking and making even if there was a total language barrier and everything like that? It was just, it literally just reshaped the entire way he looked at the world in a 10-day safari. 99% of that was literally just as, about as remote as you could possibly get in the world.
That's an interesting thing. I mean, of all the places in the world I've been, everywhere I've been, the citizens, the people themselves have been just incredibly warm and welcoming.
Correct.
So nice. Whether I was in Spain, Istanbul, Turkey, it didn't matter where I was. And that's where I think a lot of times we forget. We get so tied up in the governments and the media and all the things going on. But, when my ex-wife and I were in Abu Dhabi, this was at 2005 or 6, height of the Iraq War. And this little Iraqi man kept coming over. I was displaying my knives at this hunting show convention with a sheikh, kind of a guest of their hunting show. It would be like Safari Club show, but it was in the desert. It was all based around how do you keep sand out of your gear and how do you
exactly.
you store your water. It was all based around falconry, really.
Well, that's
it was
a big,
super
big game
cool.
over there. Yeah,
it was so cool. And these guys are coming in and they're choosing falcons and they're letting these falcons fly around and but this Iraqi man kept coming over and trying to give us a rug, and you could tell this guy had very, very little money, and he kept trying to give us this things, and he was thanking us for our military being there, and he was the sweetest man, but he was just we love Americans, we love America, thank you for helping our people, but but everywhere I've been, the people of these countries they're all trying to struggle. They all have families. They're all doing the same things that we're doing.
Yeah. Life's not easy, no matter what.
Yeah.
Everyone's got struggles.
Everybody does. Yeah. What work ethic wise, it seems like all of you kids of your parents have like really hard driven work ethics.
Yeah.
Did you work for your dad? Did you work on construction sites?
Yeah, well, that was sort of perhaps the other part of that, the beginning story, right? With my mom and sort of the experiencing communism. The thing, and again, like I couldn't with a straight face say that like we weren't totally spoiled, like we were, but it was different in the sense like we were spoiled with cool experiences.
Sure,
we had dinners with people that Michael Jackson was my neighbor as a kid. You know what I mean? Like I played Nintendo with Michael Jackson and. Like peak Michael Jackson, you know what I mean? Like, when today there's 10 people that are really, really big names. It was like, then there was Michael Jackson. It was,
right.
And so that was crazy, but like, that's not something you could buy. My parents with us, they never were like, here's 10 grand, leave us alone.
Right.
My mom was really good management that way. My dad, sort of understood that he was always available to us, but like sort of on his terms. He was building a business. It was like,
right,
you can hang out with us, but like we're going to walk a job site.
Right.
But
that's no different. Like my childhood growing up, my parents were in the excavation world.
Yeah.
My dad left at 5, 6 a.m. and was gone till 7, 8, 9 p.m. Came home, greased back. Like, if you want to hang out, we're going to go look at jobs on Sunday, or we're going to grease backhoes. We're going to change oil. Like, I don't care if your dad's Donald Trump or Mark Smith, it's pretty typical for the dad, and especially in those days, to be out earn a living. And if you want to tag along with dad, he's a rancher. He's going to be out checking cows. Like, go hang out with him.
Yeah, and that's what I'd sit there and play on his office floor as he's negotiating major
right.
I don't know about then if it was $1 billion deals, but big deals.
Yeah.
If he didn't matter who he was in, if I called, he picked up the phone, even if it was only for 30 seconds. Hey, I got something big going on, but everything okay, everything good. He sort of then took over once we graduated college. It's like, now you're in my space.
Yeah.
Now you're coming into the real world. This is where I'm going to be, a bigger help. But he also, and with my mom, they always made sure, again, we weren't spoiled financially that way. We got cool experiences. We went on badass trips. We did cool stuff. We saw cool people. But at the end of the day, if we want, it wasn't like, here's Nintendo. It's like, I got Nintendo when everyone else was already getting Sega.
Sure.
As the sort of the analogy, like if we wanted something, we had to work for it. It wasn't like, oh, you clean your room and you go get whatever it is that you wanted. It was like, there's a goal and it's weeks, maybe months away. And so that was all that was important. My dad, for us, it's like, if you're going to work in the business, you're going to build buildings. Like, you better know how to build a building.
Right.
Not like on paper how to build a building. Like, you shall have dug a foundation and seen how long it takes. Like,
right.
You got to put up sheetrock. If you're in excavation, I joke, like, I'm the only son of a billionaire that can drive a D10 Caterpillar because I actually did it. Like,
right.
He made us work those jobs, starting at the lowest rung. And, it was sort of interesting. Like, I probably had more fun with that. That's why when I get myself in trouble for perhaps cursing a little too much, I'm like, listen, man, I grew up, I was 13 on job sites. If my mouth is a little bit out of control at times, it's, there's a reason for that, but it's also, there's plenty of people that probably assume I'm an asshole or think that I'm an asshole, but, there's plenty of people that like me, and it's because I'm not an asshole the other way, because we actually did the stuff in a real way.
Yeah, I've been around and seen how you treat people, and it's just unfortunate with the way that the media covers things. There's never been a family that understands that more than you guys, but it's just unfortunate the way that the media shapes how people are viewed, because I've been around some Secret Service people and some other types of people that have dealt with other politicians and other people and talk about how horrendous some of these people were to deal with. And it's some of the people who the media makes look like darlings, Yeah,
I always joke, like, I understand I'm not the upstanding citizen that Hunter Biden is, but like, I have a feeling if I was doing crack and hookers all the time, like, it'd probably be a problem. You'd heard about it. It wouldn't be Russian disinformation. It would just, or lies about Russian disinformation.
Right.
It's just a little bit of a different standard.
Yeah. It's where do you guys find the energy to put up with all this? And also, I'm just going to flat out ask, like, Why even put yourselves back through it again? Right? Because like I've said, and I don't know this to be true or not, but I've said to people, my friends, I'm like, these guys could make way more money and be out of the spotlight and like benefit probably more financially.
Oh, we did.
To just leave the whole political space and go build businesses and have fun. Why do you think it is? Why is it that your family just chooses to put yourselves back in that firing line?
Listen, for me, I found out I was a fighter. Sort of, I just kind of almost remade myself, even from a business standpoint. Like at 38, when my father ran into this, I was like, okay, well, I was always a conservative, but I lived in New York City, so it behooved myself to just shut my mouth about certain things. And by the way, that was also a time where 20 years ago, like you could have friends that were, and it was like, fine, we kind of all want to get to the same place. We agree on some, disagree on some minor things, but it doesn't really matter. I feel like that divergence is much greater. Right now, I mean, my first political fundraiser ever was for Andrew Cuomo.
Right.
Because he was the Attorney General of the state of New York, and that's the guy that signs off on your offering plan. If you build buildings and you're selling them, like, you kind of need that one.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, fine. I may not agree with everything else that he says, but we had a fine relationship, and, like, I'm a business guy conducting myself there. I think for my father, it was, really for him, it's not us, right? People are like, so how long did you talk as a family before he decided to run? I was like, honestly, dude, I didn't know he was going to do it 24 hours before. Meaning, I knew he was talking about it, but I was like, is that really going to happen? He's not that guy, right? It's like, if he wants to do it, he's going to do it. For me, I found out, I was like, okay, like if we're going to do this, I'm all in. I actually believe in these things. It matters to me. My sort of early political leanings, again, whether that was sort of experiencing communism in Czechoslovakia or, going through 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, in a burned out town that sort of exemplifies like what happened to the American dream and shipping American manufacturing abroad. It's why it's so awesome what you do and doing it all here. It's like, that used to be, what we did. Now that's gone. So some billionaire, and I understand the irony of me saying that, but it's a little different. Like we created here, some billionaire, shipping your American dream abroad to save 2 cents on a widget that, it's. So for him, if you look back, it's sort of interesting. You go back like 30 years. I mean, there's interviews of him on Oprah literally saying the exact same thing.
Yeah.
It was trade. Then it was actually Japan. Yeah. Right? That was the threat to our trade, and that's where we were getting screwed over, and that's where, and it sort of evolved into China, and that's the reality. But like, he's been remarkably consistent for a long time, and I think the reality is he's a competitor. He's a fighter, and, I think he sort of looked at it initially like, okay, well, I've been talking crap for 25 years. Like, if no one's going to do it, like I'll just step in. I think he would have gladly supported someone else if he believed that there was someone else there that could handle sort of the incoming.
Right.
I always tell the story. I wrote about it in my book Triggered. When we went down right before the infamous escalator ride, right? For the sort of announcement speech, there was an elevator ride. It was me, my brother, my what was then wife, and 2 kids. And we're going down the elevator, and he looks at me and he just goes, and now we find out who our real friends are.
Yeah.
And it was just so interesting because it was like, there's actually 2 parts to that, which is like, he understood exactly what was going to happen.
Yeah. Like
he was not a naive guy that, went from being loved by, Hollywood and this and that, coming off a top rated TV show for 10 years, right? That, it was, he knew what was going to happen. But more importantly, he knew what was going to happen, and he did it anyway.
Right.
And so, there's no doubt in my mind if, January, 2021, like he just said, you know what, I'm out. I did what I needed to do, prove what I needed to do. I'm just going to go live in Florida, shut up, enjoy sort of, what I've created. That all would have gone away. Yeah. But if you're a threat to those systems, and you see the idiocy, like you see, we must fund Ukraine, another $160 billion. I'm like, wait, we can't, but it was a real problem to cover our border and stop fentanyl. If we spent another $3 billion, like where's it going? And it's so frustrating. And so he's just of the mindset, like until there's that person that can actually fight that same way, he's just going to keep fighting. And so he understands it. It would have 100% just been a non-issue, would have gone away. And I think part of it is, part of the reason it's so vicious and so ridiculous. And, New York State, they're changing the laws and they're moving the statute of limitations, and they changed the law for 1 year so that they could go after him for something that didn't exist. And then, once they go after him, then the law reverts back to the old. I mean, it's so rigged. It's so insane that I think it actually just makes him have more resolve to just keep going and keep fighting.
Yeah. He's clearly. I mean, obviously, he's clearly that kind of a person that the harder they come at him, the harder he wants to fight. Which is it's commendable. And I've said several times, like, he doesn't have to do this. Like, he doesn't need to do this. It'd be much easier to just go golf and hang out with friends and build a business. But it's I'm glad somebody is standing up to the system. And I honestly think with what he learned in the first 4 years and what we've all learned in the last 4, it'd be very interesting to see if he gets in how that all shapes the last 4 years that he's going to be in.
Yeah, well, I think now it's like that. I mean, maybe it was nice coming in as an outsider, but you still need some real world sort of working experience in there. And so, now that you know who the snakes are, now you know the people who are actually just sort of trying to subvert you from, I think it's a lot different. And again, it's a unique election in the sense that, you can look at it like, it's the only time that, politicians have been all talk for centuries, right? This is nothing new. There's nothing new to America or anything like that. That's just the nature of the way things are in politics. But it is a unique election in the sense that this is the first time that you actually you've had real life experience under both people.
Yep.
If you're of voting age, you will have, an American, like, you will have basically lived under, both of those things. And like, I don't know that anyone can objectively say they're, better off today. Like, there's not and by the way, listen, I'll get myself into trouble for saying this. Like, my life's a lot easier if we don't win. You know what I mean? In terms of me, like, personally.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, the extra crap, last time
the
around.
cameras come off of you.
Yeah, well, the last time around, I did 50 hours of congressional testimony for treason, for the Russia thing. We know that's all a hoax now. Like, that was like, but like at the time, and it was sort of shocking to me, and it also made me more of a fighter, which was like, at first when it started, I was like, well, dude, I don't know, I take 1,000 selfies a day. There must have been some Russian asset that got a picture with me that,
right.
Like, I clearly wasn't working with Russia. Like, it's so ludicrous, but it didn't matter. It didn't stop, the head of an intelligence committee or the FBI or whatever it was from saying that. And, treason is a crime punishable by death, just so we're serious. So I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, I got into politics about 6 months ago. Don't really know what's going on when they're like, you colluded with Russia. I was like, if you saw our campaign.
For a bear hunt.
Yeah. I was like, no, I actually turned down bear hunts in Russia with buddies because I was like, I just probably can't go there.
Probably can't go, yeah.
But like, I was like, dude, we couldn't collude to order a cheeseburger. We had no idea what was going on. Like, what are you talking about? And it was like, but that didn't stop them from trying to ruin my life, throw me in jail forever or death penalty. And so I was like, that gave me its sort of level of resolve. And that's not for everyone. That's the problem. I guess I found out, perhaps honestly, I probably had more of the Trump gene than I had ever thought. It's sort of interesting. My father and my relationship, that was sort of different when he was like, I went into a family business. I was the oldest son probably, but I sort of had my other passions and I didn't play golf because I was out shooting or hunting or something like that. And so there was always a little bit of a like, well, he's just different than It was politics. It was like, okay, well, backed in the corner, that kid's a freaking animal. And like, that's it. You know what I mean? And so it's an interesting thing. And for me, that's actually was a weird one in that it also sort of shaped my entire life now. Like, the businesses I do, the stuff I do on whether it's, my podcast and, but being like the second guy on Rumble and an early investor, helping the guys at Public Square do that, starting my own sort of outdoor brand with Field Ethos and just, taking on some of the dogma that's out there. For us, Field Ethos was like, the hunting publications are getting really boring. Everyone's getting really apologetic. We saved the hoof of the elk because we had to carve chest piece. I'm like, just so we're clear, like everything is eaten. Like it's okay to like hunting. You can say you like hunting. You don't have to like hide from it. Like But everyone's gotten in this thing where everyone's so afraid of possibly offending someone that I was like, no, like I'll go offend everyone. I don't care. Like, and
that's why like from the start we've been willing to like. You won't see other knife manufacturers put a picture of a dead bear on their Instagram page or a dead elk, and it's like, but it's what we do. We're hunters. We're a hunting knife company. And I felt that from day one with our company of like, we're not going to apologize for what we do. Yeah. Now, not only am I not going to apologize, I'm going to be very proud for what we do because it's because of the hunting industry that there's money for hiking trails and there's public lands and money for fish habitat and wildlife habitat. And it's, instead of like shying away from it, not posting a picture of it, it's more of like, no, we're going to show you and we're going to educate you guys what we do and be proud of it.
Well, so many of these, and you see even in the outdoor company, they get taken over by California private equity. It's like, well, you can't do. I'm like, you're literally a hunting company. This is what you do. Like, what are you talking about? And I've seen that in companies I've even invested in. That then other people come in and the entire ethos changes. But like, there'd be literally no animals left in Africa if it were not for hunting.
Correct.
Whenever they do the hunting bans or the this bans or whatever it is, like the populations always go to hell. And it sounds terrible. You're not allowed to say it, right? But like over there, and having spent a lot of time there, and having sort of, I guess the reason people know I'm a hunter is because someone leaked like hunting photos of me in Africa, 20 years ago, and rather than doing the usual like, I don't want to call myself like celebrity, but like let's call it person with a following and something to lose because corporate America, like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'll never do that again.
Yeah,
no, it's like, here's the facts, here's the this, here's the this. Look at what happened when you banned hunting in Botswana and whatever it was, and populations went to crap because there was no money there. And you don't want to look at an animal as a commodity, but like the reality is in Africa, if I saw it, my son saw it this summer. Like a big problem obviously in the Maasai is overgrazing and stuff like that because their currency isn't cash.
Right.
It's cattle.
Yeah.
It's livestock. And so, the more you have. So guess what? A lion, there's no lions in the Maasai.
Yeah.
The reason is because there's so much cattle, so much livestock, and it's not because it's overgrazed. It's because that if one of those cattle gets killed, that guy's net worth was diminished. That is everything. That is their currency. That is their standing in society. So that carcass gets poisoned the next day. The lion comes back, the pride comes back, they eat off that carcass, and it's all done.
Yep.
We say, in a beautiful, majestic building from New York City, it's such an incredible, and it is an incredible animal.
Yeah.
Guess what? Over there, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so we have this sort of notion, Ivan Carter, sort of the sort of, great conservationist over there, and, the hunter, he's had a great line when he was going through the details, just telling me story after story about, and he just basically came to the conclusion, like, hey man, like you can't always solve third world problems with first world solutions.
Right.
Like it doesn't translate over. And so, seeing that this summer was sort of fascinating. If other people understood that, perhaps, they would get it. But some people are just so far removed from that it's literally almost impossible to do it, even with facts, reason, and logic. It's just they've. The anti-hunting lobby, and whether that's sort of, the Disney caricature of, Bambi, and, they're sentient beings that talk amongst this, I'm like,
If it wasn't for hunting in Africa, those animals, it's unfortunate in a way, but like those animals are money. They're money to somebody, and it's either poachers,
correct,
or it's the hunting industry that has an actual, dog in the hunt here. There's a need for those animals to stay on the landscape, for those people to continue to make a living.
Yeah, they're paying for the anti-poaching. People are like, why don't you do a photo safari? It goes, because those guys spend about $200 a day.
Right.
Like, I can tell you, like, what I on the hunting side, it funds entire villages.
It does.
It builds the schools. It
puts
in the water and the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Even just to have the licenses, that's part of the deal.
I have hundreds of photos.
There's no other economy that can actually create that sort of wealth in that area. It's not even close. So that whole like substitute the photo safari is like, I've done it. I've seen those hippies. It's like, an entire year of those is less than one 1 week hunt for one person.
I know several guys that have gone over there and they're giving out $100 tips to the trackers and all these people. And we're talking like year's salary, or months and months salary for $100 bill. And we always we've had a lot of people photographers go over on hunts with guys that are going safaris, and we send a ton of knives just for content. Yeah. And we always tell those photographers, give all those knives away to all the trackers and all the guides. Yeah. Because it's amazing the stories we hear back of the knives of what those people are using, and they're just so thankful to have like a good tool.
Yeah, I mean, I've done it with like, some of these trackers are incredible, right? I mean, I've got some experiences just seeing like, it's like watching an artist. Not even talking wounded stuff, but like you saw an animal, it's like, here's a blade of grass that's slightly, you see, like,
it's what would remind you of like a Native American.
Yeah, it's like it'd be like me trying to read Braille, but like they're just going. I've left these guys like Leica binoculars because it's like they could use them and like, hey, I only have this or that animal because this guy made it happen. It's a $3,500 binocular, but like I'm glad to give it to the guy because he earned it.
Yeah, those dollars for those villages. And then the other thing a lot of people don't understand is when those animals are shot in those villages, I mean, obviously you're not flying home to the U.S. with that meat. That meat is going to the villages.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of those villages, you're a hero if you're bringing one of those animals in to feed those guys for the next, number of weeks.
Oh, I saw, I got, one of the reasons I got in trouble is like, hunting elephant and whatever it was. I mean, I wish I would have actually done a better job sort of documenting the entire village there with literally axes, machetes, hacksaws, like in 3 hours, an elephant, like 8,000-pound elephant, like just
gone.
The vultures are there like, is there anything left? Like, you got anything, any meat here? Like it, and they're coming to camp that night and they're having a part. I mean, it's literally, it could be the only protein they see that month. And, and that's the other, people are like, well, can't you just get your protein like everyone else at a supermarket? I'm like, it doesn't exist. Like there, even, you talk about sort of, wealth or salary. Like I've been on safaris. I'm like, hey man, like why is that guy wearing one shoe?
Yeah.
One shoe. Like he's got 2 feet, but one shoe. He's like, well, that's all he had. But the fact that he's wearing one shoe is a status symbol. That's a symbol of wealth. I'm like, that just feels lopsided. I mean, everyone else was barefoot, but like that guy was the leader because that was, it was like, it's spectacular. And until you sort of immerse yourself in the culture and live in these camps, and by the way, similar culture, like, having spent, a couple weeks on 2 different occasions in like a yurt in Mongolia, living with like Mongol nomads, like legit, not like, Yellowstone Ranch, going back, like they're living in yurts that they move with them as the sheep graze, even in the, the steppes of Mongolia in the winter. It's like, it's just incredible culture. Yeah. It's like,
it's funny you say that about shoes, because I know a hunter that said when he goes over there, he'll take all his old shoes and as many as he can fit in his luggage and take them.
Just leave them. It's like currency.
And leave it. Yeah. And those people, and size doesn't matter. I mean, if they can get their foot in it, they're going to wear it.
Yep. I've seen it. They cut the toes off because it's a little too small, and then just sort of the toes hang out, but it's like it's still something.
Yeah.
And hey, some of these guys, you see them run barefoot for. It's not even that. It's literally at that point just yes.
Yeah.
Like they're proud. It's like it's literally a status symbol.
We're so incredibly fortunate. It's why it's so frustrating. All the politics aside, we see like the protests going on right now at all these universities and death to America. And it's funny, you got in my truck last night and you're like, death to America.
I was like, hey, I'm just waiting for you to go, taking me out. You make a lot of liberals really happy.
I had Andy Stumpf's podcast on and the title of it this week is Death to America.
I was like,
you got in the truck and it's like, okay, what am I getting into?
Yeah, it's going to be a long evening.
Yeah. But, you see these people protesting, our government, our way of life, our country. And, one thing I've done, like when we take our kids when we've taken them on vacation to Mexico, we'll leave like the beach resort area and we'll go off into the actual, like where the locals live. Right. Yep. And like when I was down in Cabo, there was a guy that's a native guy there that was friends with my buddy that was there. And so he took us on a tour of like where they live. And I mean, you get a half a mile from the beach, and it's entirely like as poor as possibly can be. Yeah. And I saw the prototypical little like 3-year-old girl like sitting there, cute little girl playing on top of a pile of garbage, and they're just using any shack. And I was a lineman, so I'm looking at the way their electricity lines are just hanging in the cactuses. And he's like, oh yeah, people get electrocuted all the time trying to fix their power. And he was like, yeah, the government hasn't delivered water to our shack or our houses in the last 2 years because some cartel member pays the government official off, and then they go around and sell water. It's like, and I asked, it would be really easy to judge and be like, oh, the dirty Mexicans, because there was garbage all over the desert outside of these guys' homes. And so I asked the guy, I'm like, dude, what's the deal with all the garbage? I mean, it's dirtier, more garbage out there than like a typical landfill. Yeah. And he was like, well, the government's supposed to come pick up the garbage, typical garbage service. You put your garbage out at the corner of your driveway, and the next morning it's gone. Yeah. He said they hadn't collected the garbage in like 5 years. Yeah. Like the government, the communist government it's a broken government. It doesn't work. And
it's controlled by the cartels who want to keep, they don't want development in those areas because those are their channels to traffic both humans and drugs.
You go down the beach, though, the beach is clean, the garbage is all down. That's where the money's at.
Because that's where the money's at. That's where the optical illusion that everything's functioning, normal. I used to go down to Sonora all the time because just being a big hunter, right? Hunting mule deer and even sheep and stuff like that up in those areas, and have just really good buddies from there. And once we got into politics and started cracking down on the cartels, I was told I had a $100 billion bounty on my head from El Chapo. I was like, I'm probably not going to. I literally turned down a buddy who's like, hey man, like I can't do this desert sheep hunt that I got to do this year. And I was like, okay, I'll go. And then like my other friend was like, hey Don, like, have you ever shot let's call it a 2,500-inch elk? I was like, no, like that. What are you talking about? They're like, that's what you are to the cartels. Like, you're not going to Sonora. Like, you're a moron. I was like, I do. I've been to Mexico 60 times. Like, some of my closest friends are native Mexicans and do these things. But yeah, it's just such a shame what's going on, in those areas, and Yeah,
and if we had that same situation, it's easy to sit there and look at them like, oh, they're dirty or whatever, and then you realize like, oh.
No, not at all.
If I didn't have a car and no one was coming to pick up my garbage, pretty soon, guess what? It's going to be strewn all over the damn place. And but the point is we just take for granted our how amazing our system of our country actually does work with garbage and clean water, and the fact that we have drinking water and refrigerated food, and that's why it's just so frustrating to see us. Tear down and protest our own country, which obviously we could be doing a lot better in a lot of parts of our country. But 100%. It's why it's also frustrating to pay taxes and then watch us send that money straight off to Ukraine. It's interesting. You brought up earlier, when your dad came into office, we were on the verge of war with North Korea. I mean, I remember it really well. Like, we were on the verge of war with him.
That was Obama to my father when they met, like, one-on-one. My dad also, he goes, that's our biggest threat. That's the biggest danger. Yeah. Like right before the transition. Like that was it. That was going really south really fast.
We were headed to war in the next few months, with Obama. And I remember everybody saying, as soon as, Trump gets in, we're just going to be in wars all over the place and he's going to be this war, blah, 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 blah. And guess what? We didn't get into another one for 4 years.
Yeah. And it was sort of funny watching that because I was like, a big part of the reason we're in all these wars is it's the nature of predation, right? If we're hunters, predators prey on the weak.
Right.
When we exude weakness as a country, when you see it, coming out of, a guy, hey, say what you want, maybe you love his politics, great. Like, if the guy can't find his way off the stage and he's the leader of the free world, like that doesn't exactly instill confidence in our allies, and it certainly exudes weakness to our enemies. That was exemplified. I remember with the North Korea stuff as that was going on, because Trump's doing it all wrong. He's going to, well, why? Well, I know because I was in charge of the North Korea delegation. I was like, well, what'd you accomplish?
Right.
I mean, that war ended in what, late 60s?
Yeah.
Like, so earlier? I guess, earlier, before, 50s. So what have you done? You've been in charge for 30 years and we're on the brink of war. You've not changed. So, he was doing it all wrong because he did it different.
Well, and your dad agreed to meet with them, and they were crushing him.
Well, he did this. They did the same with the Taliban, right? So he meets with them, and hey, guess what? All the nuclear testing stopped. They stopped firing missiles over there. It's like he's being an apologist. It's like, no, man. Sometimes you just the same. They did it with Putin. Like, he doesn't assume Putin's a good guy,
right?
But you know what? When it goes really wrong, it's nice to have that channel of communication. Now they're calling North Korea. They won't even pick up the phone. They've said that they didn't. We won't take our calls. It's like, well. Why? You got to maintain that open. They did the same. Remember the outrage when my father had the Taliban leaders to Camp David?
Yeah.
How dare he? It's like, well, guess what? He did that. That's a great story, actually. It's he shows the head guy a satellite image of his home. He's like, you have a lovely home. So why are you showing me a picture of my home? It's like, okay. Just know that I know.
Right.
And it was we didn't lose an American service member in 18 months after that. Because the guy was
mental warfare.
We understand each other.
And then a couple years,
Trump's doing it all wrong. It's all this outrage, and yet,
and a couple years later, Biden administration just hands the entire country back over to him.
And then they get on the world stage because the adults were back in charge. We were told, they get on. I always talk about this in politics because literally one of those the Afghan withdrawal was such a shameful moment. Right. I thought as a country, it's just the way they were treated. It was so obvious, and then 7 minutes later, we bombed the hell out of the guy that did it. I'm like, wait, so you didn't know it was coming?
Right.
You couldn't prevent it, but like 7 minutes later, oh no, they just bombed a goat herder and his family. Like, you know.
Well, and they tried to blame the whole thing on the fact that your dad set this up months and months earlier, and it's like, okay, well,
they accelerated the time frame. They took it out of the fight. You know, they put it into the fighting season instead of the winter. There was no one saying that we want to stay in Afghanistan. They gave away Bagram Air Force Base, like you gave it away, like right on the China border, like 16-foot deep concrete driveways or runways.
Yeah,
you give it away, and then
I'm a dumbass knife maker in Montana, and I'm looking at it going,
doesn't seem like a great strategic move.
But
our generals don't care. You know, they're worried about how many trans admirals do we have to make sure that we have, you know, the diversity and inclusion that somehow makes us a stronger fighting force. No one's articulated how the trans admiral does that, but like, I think it probably actually hurts because I think it demoralizes those who actually we want fighting for us. That's my opinion. But, you know, so I watched that whole debacle, and then I watch, you know, the Secretary of State, you know, get up on a world stage and before Congress and say, and I quote, "We are shocked and dismayed that the Taliban did not install a more diverse and inclusive government." And I'm like, I don't know, dude. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm relatively new to this, but like, I feel like I'm being fucking punked.
Seriously.
I'm like, there's a TV camera in the ceiling. It's gonna fall out and hit me. Like, I'm just the star of the Truman Show,
right?
And people are just fucking with me because they can't. Like, if you want to be dismayed, fine. You're upset that they didn't do it. Fine. You're shocked? You're shocked that the people we've been at war with for 20 years, like last week, they were throwing homosexuals off of buildings because they didn't like them. Like, that guy's going to have a seat at the table. Like, we're not throwing you off the building anymore. You're going to be a big part of government.
Yeah.
You know, they're going to hire Leah Thomas from the Penn swim team who, you know, dominated the NCAA women's thing after being a dude for 18 years. Like, that guy's going to have a seat at the table and he's going to have a voice. Like, I'm like, these are people that they won't let women get educated.
Yeah.
Women and children in sexual slavery, like they're going to have a voice all of a sudden in the new diverse and inclusive Taliban government. Like, these are not serious people, but they're making $1 trillion decisions that like, so for me, it just, I'm getting all fired because it's like, it's just infuriating as someone that has a brain watching the ridiculous things that are added into the metric that matter to no one else in the world other than a few woke, insane people.
I honestly feel like we're gonna be in our 80s, and our kids are gonna be in their 40s and 50s, and they're gonna ask us, they're gonna come to us, or our grandkids that are 16, 17 at that time are gonna come to us and go, "Grandpa, what the fuck were you guys doing back in like 2020, 2024 when like you were really letting men swim against women and like go into cages and fight women, and you guys were like, what was happening back then?" Like, I'm hoping that the pendulum does go back the other way. And
I think it is. I see it with my kids. You know, they grew up in New York City, but you know, I see their friends. You know, 16, 14 to see, and like they're laughing about the trans thing. Like, it's not like they're not buying into the dogma. And it was interesting because I've been one of the guys that's sort of really vocal about like the men and women's sports. I have females, you know, daughters that are great athletes.
We both have daughters that are athletes.
Great athletes. And like, so I'm like this, but even before I knew they were great athletes, like 7 years ago, I was saying, and it was sort of interesting, even on like Twitter 1.0, like the original, which was like, let's call it like 95.5, you know, way left. You know, I'd say, hey man, I don't know. I think it's ridiculous that this guy can change his sex and 2 weeks later is competing against women and winning and taking someone's scholarship. Like, and like, even the haters were like, "Oh, dude, I hate you with a passion, Don Jr." You're like, but you're right on this one. You know, they're like, "I can't believe I'm agreeing with anything that you say," but you're right. And so even today, that hasn't changed.
Yeah.
You know, that's, and yet we're led to believe that, no, it's the social justice issue of our time to make sure that dudes can compete against women. I'm like, hey man, I have many things in my bingo cards. I literally would have never been able to tell you like 10 years ago, I'm still a Trump. Like, I was like, I'm going to be a male feminist. Like, I'm fighting for women's sports. I'm screaming about Title IX. Like, what do I?
That's what I'm saying.
Where are the women? Where are the soccer moms?
We're old enough to remember when Title IX came in and was a thing. Yeah. It was like a big deal.
I had friends that were great athletes that were, you know, they were going to get the wrestling program canceled somewhere because, you know, we had to. You had to give money to a sport that no one was watching, or it's like, and again. It's fine. Like I said, my daughter will probably end up going to school for golf. Like, you know, she's a great athlete. My younger daughter probably shows as much, if not more, promise, if that's what they want to do.
Right.
But it's like, it was so, and now it's like, well, we're going to just take out the whole gender. I'm like, then what's the point?
It does make you wonder, like, how are there not 40 million soccer moms protesting across the country?
The soccer mom, the suburban housewife, I feel like, honestly, you don't want to call them a terror threat, but it's like when your entire, like, sort of life revolves around like virtue signaling.
Yeah.
Like you don't want for anything. You don't actually fear anything. You've got a really good life, and it's like you're bored. It's like, well, this is how to do it. I'm going to get social props. And like, half the people that were posting black squares during the BLM, Summer of Love arson riots, like they don't actually believe that stuff. But like they got so much social clout at Starbucks that it was still worth it. It's like Hollywood. Like why I'm a believer in math, statistics,
right.
Why is it that like every other star in Hollywood has a trans child? Like it's not like a genetic no, it's like an accessory, man. It's
that's
like,
why I
that's
say
a Lambo. Like, that's like having a Lambo in Miami. You know what I mean? That's a Birkin bag.
That's why I say
your accessory.
Dad's, your parents, the way they did it, like today, 3 of you guys would be, Eric would be a, Erica.
Well, no, I tell listen, I got 3 boys who, white boys that are last name Trump. I'm like, hey man, like you better come out trans quickly because like you're gonna if you want to go to college, like law school, we're gonna have to, maybe I don't want you to actually do it, but like if you may have to game the system here a little bit, like you just
to get through
blink
school
3 times to let me know that you're just kidding, and I'll go along with this bullshit. But like, but it's true.
It's
like, think of how many your daughter's going to probably go sports scholarship. Like, think of like the value. Now, I think college itself is a very it's an ever decreasing value proposition. I think most people would be better off becoming linemen than they getting a degree in underwater basket weaving.
For sure depends on what your goals in life are. And I say all the time, like, I think college is fantastic. Like, my daughter wants to be a veterinarian.
Yeah.
She's got to go to college.
Yeah. But if you're going to get a gender studies degree, like, I don't know, man, you're probably not going to pay back that college loan. But guess what? You and another lineman across the country are going to be paying back someone else's worthless doctorate, in gender studies or, art history. It's wonderful. But like, if you're shocked that you took on $500,000 in loans
and no one will hire
for a job that at best is going to pay you $25,000 and you can't get it back, like maybe you should have taken more math. Like you don't see like electrical engineers complaining about like the value of their degree,
right?
But we've come up with every degree. There's classes on Taylor Swift. Like it's wonderful, but like unless you're Taylor Swift, you're probably not monetizing it all that well.
Well, and I look at like my daughter. She's got a full ride scholarship for basketball, and her brother that's 2 years younger, that's 15, would destroy her in a game of one-on-one. Yeah. Like, there's no way that my daughter, as a scholarship athlete, could go into a basketball game and compete against a male. Yeah. Like, it just...
And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
That's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
It boggles my mind. I just don't understand. Like, we can argue... There's arguments about abortion. There's arguments about gun control and where it's right and what forms of gun control should we or shouldn't we allow and where. And like there's these arguments that I understand, like even if I don't agree with the other side, like I can understand
it's a conversation.
Oh, you were raised in an apartment in New York City. You're going to have a different view than me in Montana. And we're going to have to try to figure out a middle ground that's going to work for all of us here. And like, is abortion the day after the baby's conceived, or is it 3 or 6 months? I don't know. All these things. A man and a woman, like, that's where I'm just like...
Trust the science. Trust the science, Judge. Well, that's the problem. But we graduate,
But during COVID, you're supposed to believe the science.
Yeah, there's literally districts, like, in our country, like, districts, where, like, less than, like, 3% of the graduating class of a high school can do math or read.
Right.
But we're graduating them. I guarantee you they can list the 4,376 genders that
math is racist.
Yeah, everything's racist. That's the problem. Like, well, everything is. It's like it's become the easy button of the left. If we don't like it, it's racist.
Right.
If we don't, if you don't, it's like, when you can't defend an argument, that's the easiest thing. And the problem with it is that it was probably a very effective tool to sort of move the leftist needle forward. The problem is it is a real thing still. It's just not the cause of and solution for all of life's problems. Like it's I've traveled all over the country, all over I'm sure it exists, but like it's not like this. Half the country's incredibly racist. It's like no, there's a couple lunatics that probably are, and there are people that are affected by it.
Yep.
But when everything is racist, when that's the answer to everything, and we got to turn it into some sort of victimhood. Now, when people hear it, it's like You roll your eyes. It's like,
Yeah.
I could talk about basics that had nothing to do.
Which
And it's like, you're racist. And so it does a disservice for those who are actually
being afflicted by it. Yep.
Because now no one cares. It's like, that used to,
it's your
3 or 4 years ago, if you were called racist, I was like, I will change my entire mindset to prove you wrong.
Right.
Now we're like, okay, roll your eyes, move on.
Yeah. It's the whole crying wolf adage, that once someone cries wolf and then there's actually a wolf, people aren't listening.
Correct.
And that is really unfortunate because there is racism in this country and, there always will be. Like, but that also not everyone is racist. So it's just, I actually, with the whole college thing and the trade stuff, one thing that I actually think that the government could fund instead of, missiles to Ukraine would be these. I've wanted to see something come out where you build these huge warehouses, an empty warehouse right in the inner city somewhere of all these different, really poverty-stricken, areas where maybe there are a lot of young kids that are growing up without dads or moms or in these bad situations. And maybe those kids don't have the opportunity that you did to learn how to run a dozer or that I did how to run a backhoe when I was a kid. Yeah. If you built these empty warehouses and you ran power and water into one end of it and you bring in these kids that are 12, 13, 15 years old and say, throughout this school year, we're going to frame a bunch of walls across this building and we're going to put a bathroom in over there, kitchen over there. You're going to learn how to frame all those walls. We're going to take this water and we're going to make those toilets flush. We're gonna wire it. We're gonna turn the lights on. We're gonna sheetrock it, tape it, texture it, mud it, paint it, and at the end of the year, we're gonna have a party. And then the last week, we're gonna demo it. And next year, it's gonna be an empty warehouse, and the next bunch of kids run through. And you would actually provide and show kids that are raised in an apartment without any.
I love that idea, dude. I love that idea.
And maybe this kid who's getting terrible grades that doesn't have any. Maybe actual hope in life, at least in his frame of reference, takes to the electrical or the plumbing or is like, man, painting is fun. I love hanging sheetrock. It's physical and I'm strong and I like doing it. Or, I like to swing a hammer and I actually create something with my hands because I was very fortunate to do things with my hands as a kid. Yeah. But, when I walk around the Bronx, when I was in New York and all these different places and I see like, these kids don't get the opportunity to even try something with their hands. Yeah. And they don't have a male figure that they know who is a roofer or a plumber. And we could actually show these kids, hey, by the way, you like framing. Did you know this summer you could go get a job down the street with so-and-so for $25 an hour, $20 an hour as a grunt? Yeah. And in 3 years, you could be running crews. And in 10 years, you could own the company and have 50 people working for you. Yeah. Like,
I love it.
It would actually be a very cheap, just an empty warehouse. Yep. And every year you frame it out and you tear it down, but you would actually give these kids in those areas skills. Yep. Real skills where they're like, that's hope. Like, I don't want to get into these drugs. I don't want to do this with these gangs. I'm going to go try and get a job with the local roofer.
I think it'd be a huge thing, even just in terms of even the cultural shift. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, hey, it's okay to do that. That's
and you don't need to go to college to do any of those careers. Correct. And you can go make $100,000 a year, $200,000 a year. Like, that's the thing to me is to show that like college isn't for everybody. I'm a keynote speaker at a high school graduation here in a couple weeks. And part of the message I want to get across is some of you are getting straight A's and going to go to college and be doctors. And that's awesome. Some of you aren't going to go to college. And at least when I was in high school, like if you didn't go to college, you were like, oh, you're just going to hang out and dig ditches. Well, yeah, my dad digs ditches for a living, has done real well.
Yeah. He's done fine.
Yeah.
Done great.
Real great. Yeah. It's okay if I became a journeyman lineman. I went and got an apprenticeship. I think a grunt starting out in the lineman trade right now is about $25, $26 an hour. That's a 19-year-old coming out of high school knowing jack shit. Yeah. And in 5 years, he can be making $200,000, $150,000, $300,000, depending on what you, and travel the world and turn, come to Florida when you have a hurricane and Donald Trump Jr.'s lights are out and turn his lights on for him.
Because that's the one side. I never spent too much time on the electrical side. I think I'd probably kill myself.
Yeah. But we need to actually, if anyone wants to affect those inner cities in a positive way, we actually have to give those kids hope and actually make them feel good for something they accomplish. During a day and show them that like, hey, you do need a little bit of math to do this. I tell this, when I got my apprentice, when I was accepted with my apprenticeship for a lineman, the first thing I had to do before I could become an apprentice was take a algebra test, math test. Yeah. I had to go buy Math for Dummies because I was terrible at math, and the point is you'd show these kids like, hey, you do need to learn a little bit of basic math, and a class like that might actually send those kids back into their other classes and be like, oh, I do need to learn how to write just a little bit.
Yeah.
Like I do need to learn how to do a little bit of math. Like I don't need, to be an expert in chemistry.
Yeah, you don't have to recite Shakespeare.
But I'm going to go into my freshman class and pay attention today because Pythagorean's theorem, I want to know how long to make that guy wire on that power pole. Mm-hmm. Like I got to use that, and just provide some real life, application to it.
Yeah, it feels like there could be so much done there. I think we put so much currency into college. If you didn't go to college, to your point, if you didn't go to college, what are you like? Well, I mean, I look at what we're graduating, and I'm seeing these these kids that try to make these arguments, and they're just hopeless. And like what's that person going to do in life? If they're struggling at college, oftentimes fully paid for. It's not even like they're working a job. They're just with their ridiculous degree, and they're screaming about things they can't even comprehend or fathom. It's like, what's that person going to do when they get into the real world? And the real world kicks you in the dick. It will.
And my boy's in wood shop right now, and it's great. But I mean, he's making a wooden spoon and a table. Yeah. It's fine. It's awesome. It's nice that they get a little bit of experience on a saw or whatever. But
it's not framing.
It's not framing. Yeah. It's not. Different. It's not and with a class like that, with a building like that, you're going to teach them probably around 8 to 10 trades.
Yeah.
In 1 year. The basics.
Yep.
Enough basics for them to walk up and be like, "Hey, Mr. Trump, can I get a job as a grunt on your framing crew?"
Yeah.
I framed all fall at
and
school.
You need a little bit of basics in all of the other stuff because ultimately it all ties together.
It does.
Right? So you can't just frame and not have an understanding of electrical. You can't, or plumbing or right. So you need to actually know a little bit all of it.
Yeah. That board sticks out an inch, it's going to screw the sheetrock.
Yeah, and everything else, 1 inch here just translates. It's a lot of inches everywhere else. So you can't play that game. So no, I think. And we push a lot for that. I know in my father's administration, there was a lot of work on the trade stuff, but then it's again, academia gets all mad, and then they want more money for their colleges, and they need billions and trillions in endowments, and they don't actually educate their kids, and it's
when he gets
indoctrination camps.
When he gets elected, let's do the Trades Act of America.
I'm in.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
So last thing I want to cover real quick is tell me a little bit about Field Ethos.
Yeah, so Field Ethos sort of multimedia, publication. We do a really sort of high-end, like quarterly print journal, stories you want to hear around a campfire. It started off as like, it was me and a couple buddies, it's for co-founder Jason Vincent. He was, a game warden and, federal law enforcement officer. And there was another buddy that was a SEAL team sniper and, guy, Colin Jones from the Carolina Panthers. And it was like, just on like a text thread. And it sort of started off as like you read something and it's like, oh my God, like even hunting's going woke. And even, so it started off, people are like, this funny sort of back and forth banter from all these guys, this craziest like walks of life. And they're like, someone's got to put this down. And it just sort of grew from there. So it had kind of created a social media presence and then sort of, an online presence and then a print journal. And it's been really sort of an organic thing, just an unapologetic, adventure. It actually sort of morphed more into adventure lifestyle. There's sort of, the Baja 1000 stuff and cross country, trekking adventures. And all these guys from different walks of life started saying, hey man, that Field Ethos thing, I like the voice. Like what's really interesting, like 90% of the articles in like the print journal and even the online, like guys like first time writers just did something really cool.
Yeah.
There's a guy submits something, Ernest Hemingway's great grandson writes for us. He's like, I never take a shot at writing, but what do you think? And it was like, some genes carry it. It's spectacular. It was a great story. Some of the early, guy was an F-18 pilot over in Afghanistan. And he took up fly fishing. And so it was like how people sort of got into the outdoors and that adventure lifestyle as a decompression from life. And so it was one of these things, we just sort of did it on our own. It was sort of a little passion project for me. It's never going to be, a big business deal, but it's like, I'm so passionate about the outdoors and, exposing that. And I think as everything else has gotten so, boring and corporatized,
right?
We have guys that we do sort of, that do advertising with us and they're like, hey man, keep doing what you're doing, but we have to send you a letter saying like, we're really upset about this because like some loser on the board that, of a gun company that doesn't know anything about guns or anything.
Right.
So we don't find this appropriate. So they're like, this is our cover your ass letter, but we don't want you to actually change anything. And so We just
It's
had a
like
lot of
guys
fun with
being
it.
guys.
Yeah, so check it out at like fieldethos.com and just sort of, again.
But the quality of the writing, the storytelling is amazing. The photography, the quality of the journal itself.
Yeah.
Everything about it is so high quality. But then it's also, like you say, to me, it's more like it reminds me of being in hunting, what it would be like being in a hunting camp.
That's what it like that, and that's what's been missing. The usual publications. 700 ways to catch spring bass. It's like, I've read that article for 50 years. I'm good. I got it. Right. You know what I mean? Like, it's a little bit of that. What's also sort of interesting is people like, Politico did an article on us, like Slate, and they're like, it's like women writers from a very heavy liberal background. They're like, it's kind of fascinating. And it was like, well, but it's interesting because like, as sort of unapologetically masculine as is, our readership and subscriber base is like 33% female.
Oh,
which
really?
is unheard of in hunting, fishing. Like, it doesn't exist. Like, Mike Scobie, who came when he ran OSG, which is like Peterson's and all these big hunting. He's like, if we had 3 to 5% female, it was like a big deal.
Right.
And it's like, everything we're saying is like, hey, like, to the gender conversation, like, guess what? Like, women today actually still appreciate like masculine men. Like, you don't have to, chop your nuts off and be neutered to be attractive to and so it's just sort of taken on a life of its own. And because it's just a passion project, we keep it tight. Like we don't do this stuff with guys that we wouldn't want to do. We're not sort of like, 30 pages of ads. It's just, It's been a fun thing. And for me, just a way to expose other people to it. A lot of new first-time hunters looking for ways to get into it. And they just sort of love the idea. It's sort of like, if you could take like a modern day version of like Peter Capstick or something like that, you know what I mean? Like that kind of writing, just good writing, fun, witty, unapologetic.
It's really
probably
cool.
a little too much drinking, but like, everything you see around a sort of a hunting campfire.
No, I love it. I see you guys just did a knife with Dan Winkler with Winkler Knives, and Dan and Karen are phenomenal people. I loved seeing that Field Ethos knife in there.
Yeah. We'll do one-off collabs, sort of aspirational, that kind of stuff. So we got to get something going.
Yeah, no, for sure, we'd love to. Would love to do that. But I did knife shows with Dan and Karen for years, and they're just the sweetest people.
Yeah.
And they've done really well with their knives, especially with the Navy SEAL crowd and.
Yeah, well, and that was a total transformation. Like I said, I'm sort of a knife nerd a little bit. You know what I mean? Not down that, but like. I had Winkler stuff 25 years ago when he was doing like the period pieces, like
incredible,
and like I have a dozen of those, and I'm like, they're the coolest knives
ever.
And then
coolest.
It just a super good guy. So I knew him from all the shows from years ago when I used to go, and just as an outdoorsman, and I was like, that's just a cool knife, man.
Karen was incredible with her leather work and all, like you say, the period pieces and stuff. Just both of them, and it's really cool, like a husband and wife teaming up to create this package. With the knife and sheath and everything, it just unbelievable.
Yeah, for those who it was like the stuff from like the Last of the Mohicans. Like he made all of that. Like so it just
so talented. And then what he did with his tomahawks and everything with the Navy SEAL crowd. And I remember him just starting into that stuff, and telling me about like, I'm doing some knives for some Navy SEALs, and it's cool to see where it's come. I mean, that's the thing about the knife industry is that I'm only where I am today because of people in the knife industry. Like, I didn't learn much from Dan. Like Dan and I weren't close in that way as far as like he was clear on the East Coast, but the knife makers on this side of the country that helped me get where I got. Yeah. And then we'd go to shows and it would be like a family reunion every time we had a show. So, it's cool. So like when I see Field Ethos do something with somebody like with Winkler, I cheer for it, you know?
It's all unique stuff. Like, and for me, again, I'm so passionate about the hunting stuff. I probably spend far too much time but like,
it probably got
money's not
sane.
my biggest motivator. You know what I mean? So no, it's what keeps me sane. A couple buddies of mine, we bought an outfit up in the Yukon, like a hunting outfit. McMillan River, adventures up there because that's what I if I have to be somewhere, it's like I want to be on a mountain with a pack, chasing sheep and. At 46, it's like I figure I got a couple more years in my knees left before I have to focus on the moose down, lower in the valley. I'm just a believer in the outdoor stuff again for the kids, for the next generation, making sure that exists. The big problem is and what we were talking about earlier, sort of, and as someone now who's, again, it's not going to be. This is certainly not my get rich quick scheme. It's probably my lose money slowly scheme. But I just believe in it so much. But it's what's gone on with hunting, where everything's it's getting so expensive and so hard, and it's impossible to get access. And how do you get a kid out there? That's what it's so important for, get a kid, get him on a range, take him hunting, be a mentor. Like, it may not be ideal. It may screw up your hunt, but like, if we don't do that, it's not going to exist in a few years.
Well, you're an example of it. I mean, like you said, when you're in Pennsylvania, somebody took you hunting and helped you get involved. And my dad didn't hunt. So it was somebody in where I grew up, a few different guys that, I would bug and ask questions about, of them, and they would take me hunting. So yeah, man, if people around this country, if you're taking your kid hunting and his best friend is asking you 100 questions about it, like, invite him along.
Yeah.
Because even if you just give him a little taste of it, maybe in junior high school, that kid, when he gets his own license and he gets out of the house down the road, maybe you gave him just enough of a spark and a foundation to go do it on their own.
I didn't kill anything those first couple of years in Pennsylvania. Like, I was like probably dodging bullets in the, I guess, I also, same guy took me on like my first like sort of pheasant shoot, upland shoot. So shot some pheasant, but it didn't matter. Like, I fell in love. I read every book there was. I read everything there was. Then as soon as I could drive, then it was like there. But I probably didn't kill my first deer till I was 19 years old or something like that.
But the spark was there.
But I was hunting from 12, 13.
Yeah.
The same thing with fishing. And so, if everyone can take someone, I used to do a lot, right? I lived in New York City, even most of my adult life until I moved to Florida 3.5 years ago. I would take people who were really anti-gun, like you've known me for 20 years. Like, you trust me. Like, you trust me with 6 hours of your life. Like, we're going to go shooting. Right. No, I can't do that. Guns, that's ridiculous that you do this. Give me 6 hours. Okay.
Yeah. We'll keep it off social media.
Yeah.
Just
you don't have to tell anyone you ever shot a gun. And plausible deniability. We'll leave the phones in the car. Like, I did this every year, and shoot some clays, shoot some things, pull out the AR if it's going. Not one person that I did that for. Not one wasn't like, that was the coolest afternoon I've ever had. When are we going back?
Right.
And so I took someone who was like anti-gun, and I'm not saying they're going to go be a gun nut like me, or buy a machine, build a machine shop like my brother Eric, and build his own. It's not like, it doesn't have to be like that, but that person, they get it.
Yeah.
They're not voting against it. They're not trying to say, you change an entire thing in one afternoon.
Their attitude about it.
Some of the guys I did that with were again, they're vehemently anti-gun. They're collectors now.
Right.
So if we don't do that, and you see that, whether it's hunting, whether it's guns, they try to make it so hard, so oppressive that other people don't get into it, that you lose the critical mass. That critical mass is votes. Votes is politics. That's everything's downstream from there, right? You see it, honestly, I think, a lot with hunting. I mean, I think, the whole wolf thing out west it's purely designed to thin elk herds.
Yep.
It's not about, there was no Arctic wolf down here. This is nonsense.
Now they're introducing grizzly bears into the Olympia, or is it the Olympic or the Olympia Mountains or Olympic Mountains? What out in Washington?
Yeah.
They're reintroducing grizzly bears out there. It's not about.
It's designed to thin the herd, so hunting success rates go down. If you don't have mule deer, you don't have elk, or if you have very few of them, the guy that's trying to do a weekend warrior hunt, just trying to take because they're working hard and they just want to do that, continue a family tradition. Guess what? 3-4 years of striking out.
Yep.
I have friends that, they went into the Bob Marshall every year for 20 years. We
It
went
changed.
in for the last 3 years. We have not heard an elk, let alone seen one, let alone shot at one. We have not even heard a bugle of an elk on a beautiful, crisp fall morning in the peak of the rut. And it's guess what? They stopped going.
Right.
So to me,
and then those
that couldn't be
outfitters,
more clear. There's no other reason for it.
Those outfitters go out of business. Yeah. The Bob Marshall Wilderness, I mean, I grew up on the edge of it in Lincoln. Yeah. And opening day of rifle season, the town used to be packed with out-of-staters, out-of-towners. It was a huge, economic boon to that industry, or to that little town.
Yeah.
And it's just not that way anymore. And that's the thing too, is the hunting industry also supports business owned by liberals and Democrats too, and non-hunters. Yeah. It supports everybody. A state like Montana, Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho, it's huge to those areas, and you're exactly right. The reason that they're doing this stuff is they're trying to knock down these herds, and it's working in the places they're doing.
I mean, you look at some of the numbers I've seen. I mean, some stats out of Idaho. 10% of the population 15 years ago. And elk. There's plenty of habitat for them. There's plenty of this. There's only literally one thing changing that. It ain't hunting pressure.
Right. It's predators.
It's scary, and it's so clear that it's with a purpose. That all of the court battles are fought in D.C. Why is that? Because you're taking people that you can play on the emotional harpstrings of a judge in D.C., not someone who actually understands what's going on because they live in the
Well, and I saw somebody saying something about how many millions of hunters are out there, and they were equating the millions of hunters to all dead animals, and it was like, a tiny fraction of those people are actually successful.
Oh yeah, I mean,
like
when I lived out, when I graduated from Wharton, I moved out west. I was a bartender in Aspen for Colorado for a year and a half, just so I could basically hunt and fly fish and just have a blast. It's like, and it was like me and two buddies. I was a D1 rower in college, so I was in good shape and whatever. My two buddies were U.S. ski team guys, and we hunted public land elk, and all three of us tagged out on public land elk. But 29 days in a row. You know what I mean? Every day. I worked at night, so it didn't matter. And we hunted hard. We were in better shape than most, but like our odds were like, it was like 3%.
Yeah.
At the time. And we were, in the best shape of our lives. And it was so hard then.
Yeah.
This is literally right before 9/11, right? So September 2001 is when I tagged, and it was like, that was my first like public land bull. And it was like, wow, man, I did vertical that you wouldn't believe. I had a 34 resting heart rate. I was an animal coming out of college or whatever. I was like doing it now. It's like I'd probably be dead.
Yeah, those are big mountains down there.
It's that hard, and they're only trying to make it harder. And like, there's no other reason for it other than that. There's literally like they could say everything they want, but like, give me a break.
You alluded to it earlier. Your brother with his guns, and some of my favorite photos that I get. Or when Eric texts me photos of like him restoring like an old vise.
Yeah. He's full on like nerd with like 100-year-old vise. And
it's so cool. Like you see Eric Trump and your whole family, and then I get a picture of like this shitty old vise, and then the next picture is this thing looks like it was painted and it was made in 1945.
Yeah.
And he completely like redid the screw in it. He got a surface grinder. Completely stripped it all down and found a tag that was in the old original Colt Firearms factory.
Correct. Yeah.
And then he repaints it and refurbishes all of it.
Well, I get like the nerd text on like a Sunday afternoon, and it's like it's really him chambering a barrel, and it's just a video of like the run out gauge, and it's like just zero. Like, I'm like, good thing you don't have to do that for a living, buddy, because I know like he's so like anal and meticulous that he'll sit there for like 7 hours just be like zero run out. And
but that's my point.
He's cranking out some. He probably couldn't do it for a living because you'd make one gun a month. It probably wouldn't work. Right. But like. For himself, or if he's chambering a gun for me or something like that, they all shoot, man, because he does it well and he takes it seriously.
But that's my point about your parents and the way they raised you guys is you kids all have your own thing. You do your own thing. The stuff that you do in the hunting industry and long range shooting and business and the things that your sister does and like Eric refurbishing, equipment and building guns, but then also doing the business side and politics and, people can say what they want about your dad in particular, but your parents. But how many people raise that many kids that are all so successful in different areas and avenues and interested in different things? I mean, I think they did something right. That's for sure.
I appreciate that.
It's really cool. And I see you doing it with your kids and, you're going to, you look at how competitive, anyone who's golfed can watch your daughter swing and hit a ball and realize you don't just go hit a golf ball like that because you have money.
Yeah, no,
you put in work.
That kid work.
You have to work.
And it's sort of funny when we talk about parenting and stuff like that. Having 5 kids, it's like I feel like we've done the same thing for all, but they're all so different. Like there's not like a formula for success that just translates across. They're all so different. My oldest is just sort of a machine. She'll wake up at 5 and work out and then stretch and then go to school and then do her homework and then go play 18 and then go work out again and then work on her swing. She went to I was following her around this last weekend, at a tournament, and she was like tired and had a long week at school, yada yada yada, exams and this, and then she's playing in a tournament. It was Saturday, Sunday, so she played 18 and whatever, and then Sunday, and like I have dinner with her on Sunday. She's like, well, I'm really tired. I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, you played 18 in the morning, but that's nothing. She's like, no, Dad, I played 18 in a tournament. Then I went and hit balls for 4 hours. Yeah. Then I worked out. Then I did homework, and now I'm at dinner. I'm like, wait, what? Like, but you can't turn that off. Like, I'm like, I want to be like, hey, you also have to relax, but you just, it's not the way her mind works. She's got like my dad, like just myopic focus on like, if I wasn't hitting my wedges well, I'll go hit them for 4 hours until it's right. And it's like, that's just unusual.
Well, and there's also this, it's impossible to measure, but there's this stress of, and my grandfather's running for president of the United States.
Yeah. And they're trying to throw him in jail for 700 years.
They're trying to put him in jail. Yeah, so like, there's that stress.
There's additional stress.
Of all her friends asking her like, oh, what about this and what about that? And
that one's sort of weird, I guess, because like, I almost don't even think about it. Like, they're like, so, Don, what are you doing this week? It's like, oh, I got this, I got that, I got my things. I'm going to speak. It's like, well, what about you're going to go sit? I was like, I'm not helping sitting in a court. I'm not a lawyer. Like, you know what I mean? Like, my dad is like, I call him right before the nonsense started in New York. And it's like, the one, where they changed the statute of limitation. They changed the rules. They changed the law. The star witness is a literally convicted, liar before Congress, amongst other things. And I'm like, hey man, you okay? He goes, yeah. Like, what are you talking about? I'm like, okay, well, I don't know. Like, seems like could be a big, long couple of months. Like, just wanted to check in. He's like, I'm fine. Just good. Like, we don't need to talk about it. It's ridiculous. I'm like, well, it's ridiculous, but there's still consequence. Like,
there's something.
And it's just, it's sort of interesting. So I guess, I guess we're blessed with that mentality, because I think if you didn't have it,
right,
not everyone can handle that, right?
No.
Whether it's, call it, fight or flight, like, I guess we had the fight thing. If you had the flight thing, it'd be problematic. Like, we joked before getting on here, like, "Hey Don, are you comfortable on a mic?" I'm like, if I wasn't, I'd have a really shitty existence. It would be, every day would be a long day. And so, it's just sort of unique. So, we don't have to think about it.
I'm experiencing it in just the tiniest way, because, and I haven't really talked much about it publicly, but I will be. But like, Benchmade is suing us right now, and my reaction to it is, bring it on, motherfuckers! Like, I can't wait to crush them with that. But I can't imagine, your dad's dealing with it in multiple states and multiple.
Oh, yeah, no, 700 years plus the death penalty in one case. Like, I mean, it seems like a lot. Like, for mean tweets, like, it's I don't know.
It's unbelievable.
Seems aggressive, but that's just me.
But there are people that have more of that, like, fighter mentality.
Correct.
And there's people that don't. But it's why you guys have gotten to where you have, and your dad got to where he did in business. And
that's the problem. I mean, with America today, that's the thing. Like, Benchmade's going to come after you because they see a smaller company that they can just try to break you with legal. Like, you could be 100% right. Guess what? You go through a protracted, long 10-year legal battle. I've seen it, and it's like, well, eventually the little guy just runs out of money, and that's their tactic. I mean, I've seen these guys do it. They know they're wrong, and it doesn't matter, because they know they have the ability to sort of win the war of attrition.
Right.
And so it's so important for people to actually have those balls and to actually fight back, because I mean, I think so much of what I do, even business-wise now, is sort of that sort of focused on that small business, the patriot economy, like away from like woke corporate America. It's what I'm actually here partially with the guys from Public Square doing that, like linking up like-minded people with small businesses and patriotic businesses, not just saying, okay, well, I'll buy it off Amazon and give Jeff Bezos, another,
that's why we're direct to consumer.
$1,000 to go. Exactly. And I knew that model because, Jason Hairston of Kuyu was my best friend, and like I was an early investor in Kuyu, and I used to be the marketing catalog of Kuyu. That was our sheep hunts, and it was but that was all direct to consumer, because how do you give a quality product once you go through all these layers of this, and everyone's got to take their 50% for oftentimes doing nothing. Now, distribution, you see a lot of that. They Google, like, how much of a transaction goes to Google? It's like, well, some places it's 30 to 45% of the transaction goes to Google simply for having the real estate of a web page. I'm like, that's crushing small business. How do we get around that?
Yeah.
How do we go, and so, working on for me, that's literally become like, that's my job now, is figuring out these sort of, other avenues to support those American small businesses.
Right.
It's legitimately like why I'm in Montana right now. I'm doing some stuff for Montana GOP as well, but it's like,
I
part
love
of that battle is political, in the sense that you got to make sure that exists.
And we need that support of those small businesses. And it's part of it. When I started MKC, it was like, well, you guys can't do this without going through China. I'm like, bullshit. And I believe Americans, I don't need 300 million customers. If 100 million people believe in American manufacturing and buying local, and
it's good business.
It's good.
Well, by the way, that was shocking for me too, right? We got into politics all of a sudden, like, hey, we build hotels and high-end real estate in major cities.
Right.
Around the world, but like in America, like, well, those aren't, conservative-leaning places necessarily in the cities, and high-end real estate or high-end hotels is sort of universal, right? You want to cater to the whole market. And it was like, wow, that was like, hey, this is, but yeah, you get to that point where it's like, well, if I don't fight for this, like, what's it going to be like? If the whole world is just Amazon and all the small businesses are gone and everyone's great knife idea is knocked off by someone who's going to produce it cheaper in China, and we're all going to support that. Like, what's our future going to look like? It's going to be like one big corporate blob. And I'm like, so that small business as the lifeblood of America is so critical to fight for. And so, so for me, like, it was weird. Like, politics, as brutal as it was, and as much as they've gone after me, and liable for this and millions in legal fees and stuff like that, I'm like, no, it actually sort of solidified my resolve and actually pushed me in a direction like very different than just sort of working in a family business in real estate. Now I'm focused on all of those things and growing them.
Well, and we need to band together. I mean, it's like the way I talked about Winkler knives or Emerson knives or Chris Reeves knives or, these different
Ernest's
companies.
a great guy too.
Yeah, he's fantastic. Those we need to band together and cheer each other on. And that's why, like with Benchmade Soonest, it's so fucked up because there's a healthy competition there and whatnot, but we're also miles behind them in where we're at compared to where they're at.
Well, I told you I was, a long time in the outdoors and in the gun space and everything like that. It became more known. Again, when those guys leaked my Africa photos, that's how I got known as a hunter and a fighter for that. And then, once we got into politics, it was like, okay, well, yeah, you could go talk about guns a lot more vocally now because you're actually real. And I was, nationally ranked as a shooter and yada, yada, yada. And so, I could do these things. Les Diaz from Benchmade was a buddy of mine from 20 years ago. And
he was a great
dude. And then, then things go corporate or they get taken over or this and that.
Well, and when he passed away, then, unfortunately, then, it doesn't necessarily mean future generations have the same.
Well, that whole cutting up the guns thing was like, I watched that. I was like, oh, that was probably not the right move.
That
was pretty brutal.
You won't see Montana Knife Company cutting up guns. We'll buy more guns. We'll collect guns. But we're not going to cut them up. But no, Les was amazing to me as a kid. At the Eugene, Oregon Knife Show, I remember him bringing his butterfly knives because that's why they have a butterfly logo.
Yeah.
And I remember him starting Benchmade. I mean, I really, it's inspiring what he did and what he built. Over the last 30 years or whatever, 40 years that Benchmade has been around, and it's just he passed away and things change and it's life. But I welcome the challenge. It tells me that we're on the right path when all of a sudden you're enough of a threat.
You got the right enemies.
The only answer they have is to just call their lawyers and start suing people. But I really appreciate you coming on here.
My pleasure, buddy.
Yeah, and I really do, like, from the bottom of my heart, want to thank you and your family for what you guys do put up with, because it would be easy to just go away, go hunt, build hotels, live a good life, raise your kids. You spend, we were talking about, Henry's got his little baby in here.
Oh, that's awesome. Look at that. Next generation. I love it.
There you go. We were talking about, how many days a year you spend on, your plane was late last night, and I was like, don't you love commercial airline travel? And you were like, yeah, 300,000 miles a year.
Oh, I've experienced everything.
all that time that you spend away from your family and everything that you're doing right now, there's so many of us that really, really do appreciate what your family is doing, and we need someone in office right now that has some balls. And frankly, with what we're doing, it's very frustrating when you write the amount of money in dollars and taxes that we write in checks, and then you watch the same month, it gets shipped to Ukraine, or to a different country, when that same amount of money, we could have,
teach our kids to read.
This trades thing that I was just talking about, we could have built hundreds of those manufacturing those warehouses to do.
Just so we're clear, right? The Ukraine stuff, 160 total, 60 this month. You know what the budget of the Marine Corps is?
What's that?
50. Yeah. The entire Marine Corps is $50 billion a year.
Yeah.
We just sent 160 to Ukraine, 60 this month. So if you took a small fraction of that, if the Marine Corps can do like Marine Corps stuff, imagine what you could do if you create a Marine Corps for trades.
Yeah. Exactly.
Fund that for a Marine Corps for trades rather than giving it, again, by the way, like, I'm pretty involved in politics. I know everyone on. They have not articulated to me like what victory looked like, how we get there, what it actually means, what happens next. So this could be $1 trillion by the time we get done with it. But if we're sending, I guess with 160 total, let's call it 3 times plus the Marine Corps' budget, entire Marine Corps' budget in 2.5 years,
right?
With no end in sight and no articulated victory. We're just sending people to get slaughtered. By the way, they don't want it in the Ukraine either. There's, you see the party videos of all the rich guys in the cities partying still. All the guys that they look at as peasants. We'll send them to the front lines as cannon fodder. And
they're
as long
running
as someone's pilfering money,
they're running out of able bodies. It's insane. And Russia has the time. They'll wait it out.
Our sanctions screwed up the oil pricing so much that Russia is like net neutral in this thing. They're actually building up an industrial base because they have to supply this thing. Right. But with the price of gas and oil the way it went, they have not actually launched. So our stupid sanctions and the morons in D.C. have allowed them to actually pay for this war
Right.
net neutral.
Right.
Does that make sense? You know what I mean? Just the delta. You take that, sweep it off at the top. That pays for their war while building up their base, while making them allies with Saudi and China, getting away from the petrodollar, which enables us to rack up $34 trillion in debt, which allows us to fund trans programs in Pakistan for $30 million. I'm sure that money's not being stolen. It's like, we're mortgaging our children's futures, and it's like, hey, man, you may believe in some of these things, but like, the notion of common sense is just totally out the window. And like that doesn't work. You don't have to agree with everything I say. I don't agree with everything in conservative dogma either. That's fine. The things I don't agree with, I just don't talk about all that much, and it's fine. But
well, we're not all.
You can't look at what we're doing and saying like these are all things that make a lot of sense, and they're going to pencil out in the future because it doesn't work. Like eventually, as Margaret Thatcher said, the problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and just imagine if you spent that $160 billion on a trades program across the entire nation and all that money would be recycled back into our economy. And I'm not. Yeah,
that's accretive. I mean, that's that.
And that's going to go on. You're going to build people into trades that are then going to go out and work in this economy for the next 40 years.
Well, and then you also have the added, hey, take someone off welfare and give them put them in a place where they can earn $150,000 a year.
Right.
Like, think of the swing.
And support their family and then raise their own children.
Raise them better. Raise them with values. Raise them with some means that they can actually do those things. And I mean, that seems like a great way to break an actual cycle of poverty.
Right.
But we won't even have that conversation because, God forbid, we got to give it to High Priestess, Zelensky.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, I appreciate it, man.
My pleasure, buddy.
Maybe we should go shoot a cannon or something.
Let's go do it.
All right.